special events or activities that the festival had that year, or was it still, pretty much the core Alpine entertainment, German entertainment?
That was about it.
Yeah.
That was about it. There was no, we didn't really have the room down there to, and at that time everything was more centralized in the hotel area. People would wander from hotel to hotel,
go to the
get
tent.
shops, and then go in the tent, and then wander back out.
Yeah.
It was a situation, you made a lot of friends, probably some enemies. Only one enemy I remember.
Who's that?
Well, this one particular day, a lady approached me from town here. Well, I can mention her name was Alice Arducci. Was working up at the Lutheran home, and she wanted to know if we could bring some entertainment up for the patients. And I said, well, I'll try, see what I can do if I can find them, and if they're willing to come up. Well, flat out forgot it.
Oh, yeah.
And she called up, and I found out real quick that I was not a friend of hers.
Wow.
But yeah, I think she got over it. And if not, sorry, Alice.
That's right.
But, not only friends in town, but in Saginaw and some of the TV stations and the radio stations. And for years after that, you'd see them on the street. Hey, you still involved in the festival, And it was an interesting experience. It was a lot of work, but it was fun.
Yeah. Anything else you'd like to add, Gene, before we close up?
No, really not, Greg. I think we just about covered everything that I can remember. I'm sure there's probably some things I forgot, but we enjoyed it, especially the parade. The parade was a big item at that time.
Gene, when did the parade start? Do you recall what the first year was? Now, the first year that the festival happened, 1959, I don't think there was a parade, correct? It took a few years for that to...
I'm thinking that the parade may have started in 63.
Okay.
62 or 63.
Maybe that was about the third or fourth annual.
That would have been about right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was that on the first Sunday then at that time?
Yes, it was always the first
so
Sunday.
It's been on the first Sunday.
And surprisingly enough, we had quite a few entrants into the parade. I mean, it wasn't as big as it is now, and the entries, the floats, and so forth weren't as grand and glorious as they are now. But they had a pretty good turnout, I tell you.
Great.
We used to have a fleet of cars at that time. I forget who engineered that, but we went down. We had Oldsmobiles.
Okay.
And like they have the Chevrolets now, we had Oldsmobiles, and we went down to Lansing and kind of had a fun time. We took enough drivers to bring back 15 cars or 20 cars, whatever they gave us, and kind of made that part of the festival.
Yeah, it makes it fun. Well, in closing, how would you sum up your festival experiences in 10 words or less?
Well, I guess I would say that at first I was burned out, but we'll probably try it again.
Yeah.
Not to be chairman, but to work with it.
Yeah, so definitely rewarding.
Oh,
looking back over
it's rewarding.
The years, yeah.
You get burned out a little bit, but so what?
Can you describe for us how the Bavarian Festival came to be?
Well, Gary, we added the Bavarian edition, and then we wanted to have a grand opening, and it was our idea then to get as much Bavarian entertainment that we could. And we picked this certain day, I can't remember exactly what day it was, so then we talked to Dr. Brender and other folks, and we said, well, what we need all entertainment, like Tony Schuster and other people that he knew, and yodelers to perform. And at the same time, we said, okay, we have to have this the food, and so they had to make a special menu, and so it really, after we got going, we had to have this Tony Schuster and the yodelers and zither players and other entertainment that wasn't really Franklin really wasn't used to that, or even the Saginaw people. And so we had that there at the inn. And then later on, then the vendors joined in because we couldn't handle the crowd. And then we, then down the road, and later on, we had tents outdoors, and then later on, we turned it over to the city, and then they moved down to Heritage Park. But something that the problem was, which we still have today when we have festivals in town, is we didn't have enough parking. And so down there, with the tents and stuff like that, and I think that was a good move. And all of the service clubs cooperated, and all of the volunteers, and I think that was a really good move.
Yeah.
Some of the things that happened in our early festivals is we had hired a new cook by the name of Charlie, and he had worked on boats and stuff like that. And I said, Charlie, what do you think of the festival? He said, well, in all my life, I never worked where we had so much unorganized confusion. You have to imagine that they were sauerbraten orders and Wiener Schnitzel orders and Costa Ripken orders and sausage, and we weren't all that equipped, and the waiters didn't know what was going on, and we were really busy.
Yeah. And those were brand new items on your menu from that time,
brand new
right?
items, and we didn't have time that we would, run them for a week or so for me. And so they were brand new items. Another thought is that my brother-in-law, Arnold Niederlein, and after the festival was over the first year, Arnold said, well, Tiny, this is the end of all this German music and German food. And I said, oh no, Arnold, this is just the beginning.
That's right. I'm
But I
glad you were
never
right.
thought, when I think back, I never thought really that we would run this for 40 years. And so, another thing, a pair of lederhosen that I had, I borrowed that from Jack Roma. I think he had come back from Germany, and he brought back a pair of lederhosen. I don't know if it was Jack Roma or it was a Don Zender. I'm not sure on that. But then, that pair of lederhosen is still worn every year when Marvin Florin comes for our Mayfest. Marvin Florin wears that lederhosen. It fits him just perfectly. And so, that was some of the excitement that we had. Then another big thing always was the Princess Ball. That some thought that the Princess Ball should be kind of a formal affair. We tried that for a couple of years, and that didn't work out too well. And then we went back to having the Princess Ball and having it less formal. And I used to invite all of the dignitaries and the news media, because that was the kickoff for the festival. In the beginning, we didn't have no Princess Ball. And the first Princess Ball was a Hebrew girl, and she's married to a doctor now, and they live up in Alaska. And for Dorothy in the kitchen, I really got to give her a lot of credit. I met she went to a lot of cookbooks, because she had to come up with all these new recipes. Different cabbage, and sauerkraut, and the bratwurst, and the Wiener Schnitzel, and the sauerbraten, and German sausages, Spätzle, liver dumpling soup. And Tony Brender, the wife of Dr. Brender, she came down, I can still remember her. I showed her how to make Apfelstrudel. And of course, Dr. Brender helped us getting entertainment out of Detroit, because Dr. Brender was a doctor in the Detroit area for many years, and he knew some of these ethnic places that had some of these bands. And his particular band that he liked, that played a lot of the dances, was Tony Schuster. And it was a really kind of a band. And these bands that we had at the very end, they were not bands that you had at church picnics, years ago. These were more entertaining bands and dancing bands. And so, in the early years, my brother Fred, he hired all of the entertainment. And part of his job was that every year he had to go to New York when there was a festival. He had to go to New Glarus, Wisconsin, even in Florida. And so his job was to get an outstanding yodeler. Nobody ever heard of yodeler in Frankenmuth until we brought him in. And when those guys could sing a yodeler, you can hardly believe, you know, how they could carry that. 5 is that the entertainment now, and people have, with the radio and TV and records, and a lot of these people have died, and now, you know, they're looking for something different, something unique, and something that can. I'm always amazed quite often they have a beautiful entertainment on the stage, and then these people keep talking and talking to each other. They can't even hear the entertainment. You know? You've seen that too already.
Mm-hmm.
And we had one entertainer once, and they had a band up there. He would go to get everybody quiet down, and so he could. This music that we're hearing now, you know, we wouldn't want to have a lot of them. So then, what Fred did, we geared the entertainment, and we had dinner, music, and then we kind of built up until the loud bands came in, the dance bands came in. And so another thing I think is years ago the festival made a lot of money in selling beer, and they were quite strict with the beer consumption and with the laws. Mm-hmm. I think now people are more conservative, mm-hmm. and we're much stricter with the beer laws and so forth. Yeah. And that has also had an effect. And I think that if you take 40 years, I haven't got the figure, but maybe Vic Engel would have, that what the service club made and what the festival made would be maybe more than $1 million, and that's tax-free, and all this money has been plowed into Frankenmuth. And it would take out a little bit to figure out the park uptown, and Heritage Park, and swimming pools and tennis courts and all that money. And there again, I think, another thing what a lot of people don't realize, what the festival has done, it has brought the community together. You start to know each other. You're on these committees. You volunteer to bake. You volunteer for the Rotary Club. And myself, there's many people that I know because I met them through the festival. Mm-hmm. And I think we're not just a bedroom community. I think, and now these new people that are moving into Frankenmuth, you know, they can join the Rotary Club and Lions Club, but the festival, that has brought a lot of people together, and when they're down there making pretzels and all that stuff, and that's good too, you know. Yeah. And so,
no.
If you would ask me, in regards to Marv Herzog, I would say, but Marv, he played a big part in promoting the festival, and he had also been a good promoter of the Frankenmuth throughout the United States. And when he started to make his first record, I must honestly say, and Marv mentioned it previously, I always give him moral and financial support for his first record.
What year stands out in your mind as most memorable of all those early years?
Well, I think the first festival, it was like the honeymoon, because you didn't know what to expect, and with all the excitement, and every day getting ready for tomorrow, and we had a free hors d'oeuvres there in one room, and with everything being new, I think in my memory, that would be, even though I was maybe parade chairman and some of those things, which is nice, but that was a wonderful experience.
We really feel it's important to keep this festival running. It's I think a goal of every president, you know, certainly their years and after they've been out. And what advice would you have for the future success of the festival?
Well, that's kind of difficult to answer, but I think we can perpetuate the festival with the costumes and with the music, and maybe we have to put a little bit higher emphasis on the food that we serve. I think of all the festivals, we have one of the nicest wardrooms in Heritage Park of any festival.
No question about that.
And so, and the parade, I think we should continue. That has always been a big attraction. And it seems we have to continue with the Princess. It just seems that always has a big attraction. The other thing what the Princess does, it gives you a lot of news media coverage. Everybody wants to have a picture of the Princess. And so I think with the emphasis on improving the festival, having it on 2 weekends, I think that's a better idea because people are busy. They haven't got time to come to a festival on Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And in 2 weekends, I think that's a good idea. And maybe down the road, some other thought will come that we'll have to find out what people want and please them and have it above their expectations. That is always a goal that I would advise.
Great. Well, thanks so much for being with us today, and special thanks to you for getting such a great tradition started in Frankenmuth, and to Dorothy and the rest of your family, and many, many more years of success to you and good health. So
I'm just thankful that we started something that was successful. And I want to thank the people who want to continue that. And it would be down the road that we will have Frankenmuth Little Bavaria. You know?
That's right.
It's a big drawing part.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks much. Mr. Dennis Kraft, past president of the Frankenmuth Civic Events Council and Bavarian Festival. Dennis, what year were you president of the festival?
In 1991, I had the glorious responsibility for leading this fine group.
Super. How'd you ever get involved with the CEC?
There's a story behind that. It has a lot to do with bouncing back after a serious loss to the Frankenmuth Township Board. I ran for political office, got my butt kicked there. I also was put up as president for the Rotary Club, and they chose not me, but whoever I ran against. And so it was on a rebound.
I see. All right. What were some of the most memorable experiences at the festival?
It has to be that on Wednesday night at about 6:15, canceling the entire evening with great entertainment. We had Jim Neighbors that year. No, it wasn't. It was Roy Clark. We had Roy Clark. We had to cancel the performance because of weather. And just as I was canceling it, the wind was picking up the tents and knocking the poles down, and people were scattering all over. It was a sight to behold.
I recall.
Yep. And then following that, it got so cold that we recorded temperatures on both Friday and Saturday as colder than it was during the Ice Festival the same year.
Incredible. Incredible. Any other problems or challenges you had other than the weather? And that was one heck of a storm.
Yeah, it sure was. No, I'll tell you what, it was a fun project for me to work on. Those were back during the days when we had a full-time festival director in Carrie Schlobohm, who, amidst all the criticism and turbulence and working with various facets, I think did a great job for us.
Absolutely, yeah. What was it like working with all the different service clubs?
Well, I'll tell you what, it developed great political prowess in my self-being.
Beautiful. Who are entertainers? Now, you had mentioned Roy Clark was that year.
Right.
Who else do we have down there in terms of polka bands and other
well,
entertainers? Do you recall?
we had the usual. We had the Mark Jansen has been a leader in entertaining for the festival for quite a few years. We actually brought back Marv Herzog that year, and there was a pattern developing where he was playing in Ohio. We brought him back that year, and we're really pleased that he was available and cooperated with us, and that was great to have a polka, a National Hall of Famer, participating with us that year.
Absolutely, and a homegrown boy.
Amen.
Yeah. What kind of beer were we drinking in '91?
This was just after I think the year before we committed to using Budweiser, and there were some questions coming about regarding the value of that, especially with a strong loyalty to Black Label, which even I had and still have to this day. And you can test that by looking at my refrigerator at any time, and you'll see those Red Kings in the fridge. But we did go to Budweiser that year. They gave us a tremendous check, and it was also difficult to give credit to the brewery, to Black Label, because of what was going on with the brewery. We were looking at closure there. Also, we had the new Frankenmuth Brewery's beverages there as well, and we were proud to have those. So it was a nice mix. We had a good blend. We had choices for people.
Absolutely. Any special events or activities that were featured that year, Dennis?
That was the kickoff of the Wurst Fest, where we had an all-you-can-eat buffet of all different kinds of sausages from Willie Becker and Herb Bernthal and the Kern family. And that was quite a feast and a great time for everybody. But I know Shetler was there taking cholesterol tests at the tent doors, and so there were some tough moments there
That's right.
to reckon with.
Well, that's why you serve a beverage with it, especially if
exactly
that'll
right.
cut that cholesterol right down. So
Yeah,
you got
little
it.
river water never hurt anybody.
That's true. So, well, in closing, Dennis, how would you sum up your festival experience?
Very positive, very enjoyable. I developed a new sense of respect for people that volunteer. People are driven by different things, but when you pull it all together, it's amazing that you can get 2,000 to 3,000 people to volunteer and pull off such a glorious community event.
Well, great. Let's hope it sticks around, right?
Amen to that.
All right. Well,
Okay.
thanks.
You bet.
How did you get involved with the Civic Events Council?
Well, I had moved into town in about 1971, and one day I was sitting at my desk, and a gentleman by the name of Frank Rittmiller, which was one of the people I worked for at the bank, came up to me and said, "You and Don Hahn have an appointment." And we said, "Fine, whatever that is." And he said, "Come out to my office, and I've got a job for you." And little did we know that job involved becoming volunteers for the festival, and that was the first time that I got involved was the 71 Festival, and my job was to be on the ticket committee along with Don Hahn. And we then spent, at least I did, a whole number of years, along with a lot of other of the bank people on the ticket committee working for Vic Engel. And basically we learned the nature of the festival from the ground up with Vic, and developed a really long-term relationship, having a lot of fun doing that.
Well, good. So you started in '71, and then you were president in '86. So you served for a very long time.
Yeah, and a good portion of it was on the ticket committee, in which basically I didn't know what I was doing, but Don Hahn could count, and it worked out very well. And then we got a lot of other people from the bank involved, and it got to be a very structured environment, which made it kind of fun, but things flowed, and we really had a lot of fun for a lot of years doing just that. And it was after a while that I'd been on there, I became also parliamentarian. And that was fun because there wasn't a lot of issues that ever arose at the board meetings that would require a parliamentarian. But after having done that for a number of years, somebody said, finally, do you want to run for another office? And I thought, well, maybe, and talked about it and said, yeah, it'd be interesting to get involved in this. And being on the board and getting involved in that structure, after a while, you found that there's a lot of things going on besides tickets and a lot of other committees, and began to get involved with it and found that, wow, this is an interesting thing. And slowly but surely got involved in some of the other areas, and decided that it would be fun to run for the various offices that led up to the chairmanship. And little did I know at that time that that's what it would involve, but that's what we did.
Regarding 1986, who was the entertainment?
We had Myron Florin, and that was the beginning, I think the second year of the big name entertainment. And really it was a lot of fun because he had a broad appeal base, and a lot of people came from all over the place to want to see him, and it was kind of a change in atmosphere of the festival because they were looking for ways and means to kind of revitalize it, and the big name entertainment issue is what was developed at that time, and having people like Myron there was a big help because it kind of brought a whole new group of people to the festival, the bus trips and that sort of thing, which was a new market for us, and I think really helped at that time.
Tell me, what is the most memorable experience you have from your year as president?
Well, one of the things that was memorable, but not necessarily from a positive standpoint, was that I ended up having to have some surgery in my year, and were it not for the fact that that organization is strong because of all of the people in all of the offices, I think it would have been a very difficult task. But I, very fortunately had Jerry Stanton, who was following me, and who has tremendous organizational skills, and so for the period of time that I was convalescing, he was able and extremely able to take over and make the thing run very smoothly. And that's one of the real pluses, I think, of the festival, and that is you've got a group of people who can work extremely well as a unit, and there are ways and means of overcoming almost any obstacle, and that's amazing when you consider the number of people involved, all the personalities involved, and everything else. It worked like a charm, and nobody missed a beat, I think, and for that I'm very grateful. But that was memorable from the standpoint that I wish I would not have had to undergo it, but very positive from the standpoint that it proved to me that the group of people that make the festival are able to handle almost any challenge.
That's great. How would you sum up your festival experience?
I would say that in many respects it's one of the most interesting things I've ever done in life, because you get involved on so many different levels with so many different people, and that involves layers of friendships that last for years and years, and it involves a way and a means to find out that there are some people who you would never otherwise understand even live in this area, that appear and from year to year do various things for the festival and then disappear again and come back the next year, and over a period of time you develop some very, very lasting relationships with those people, as well as with the people that you spend time with from the board standpoint and that sort of thing. And I would say that the camaraderie that's involved, the overall atmosphere that's generated from the being involved with the festival is a very positive experience in a couple of areas. And I guess number one, you can do something, do it well, and still have fun, and that's a great thing to be able to do in life. And secondly, you can go home very tired and very satisfied, and there are not a lot of things in life that you can do that with. Believe me, a festival experience is one of them.
Well, Tom, thank you so much for your years of service. We appreciate you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everything that is being done now, and wish it continuing luck in the future.
Thanks. Dick, tell me, how did you get involved in the Civic Events Council?
Well, it was kind of interesting. Al Nicholas, who was a real pioneer in this festival over the years, was in charge of things, and he recruited me. He asked me if I wouldn't take on the vice chairmanship job, and so I started right out in that position because of Al.
And you were president in 1973?
Yeah, 73 was my year.
And was that one of the first or second years down at Heritage Park? When?
Yes, it was one of the early years. It might have been the second or third year down in the park, and things were still pretty crude in those days, which meant we had to do a lot of more work then than we did prior or since then. Things like building fences, and we had no midway, so we brought in a lot of asphalt and chipped wood and this sort of thing so that we'd have a place for people to walk on.
Mm-hmm. I understand you had the motorcycle gangs back then.
Oh yes, they were quite an experience, and at first you were sort of concerned that maybe they'd be a problem, but as it turned out, they were really our allies. Whenever we had any problems or anything, they were helpers.
Oh. What other special events did you have during your year? Did you have the water show?
Yes, we still had the water show, which, by the way, I've missed. I thought that was a nice feature, and we had them, I believe, 2 nights back in those days, and we had really good crowds on both sides of the river watching them. So that's one special event that we had. I don't believe we had any of the petting zoos or petting attractions back then, and I know we didn't have any of the rides and so on, because back in those days the emphasis was on keeping it more Bavarian and more Frankenmuth, and so I don't believe we had any rides in back then.
Tell me of some of your most memorable chairman duties.
I remember one of the things that was expected of the chairman was after having closed up the place at night, it had to be down there at 7 o'clock in the morning, and all of the chicken bones and the garbage and the junk was put in 50-gallon steel drums, or metal, or maybe not steel drums, but 50-gallon drums. And we had to go down, I as chairman had to go down there and meet the garbage man every morning at 7 o'clock. And I think we lifted 1,000 barrels, each weighing 1,000 pounds every morning.
Oh, wow.
So that was one of the jobs that the chairman was expected to do.
A unique part of history, I understand the police had shut you down one night.
Well, yes, those were the days when things were still quite spirited, and we had extremely big crowds, and we had to actually shut down or slow down admission sales because the tents were filled beyond capacity, which really was cause for concern. I remember a lot of nights during the festival at 8 or 9 o'clock, I'd start looking at my watch to see if midnight wasn't here soon, and time went awful slow. The one night, the last night of the festival, at 11 o'clock, the law enforcement people decided that it would be best to shut things down, and so that's the only time I can remember in all these years that the festival was shut down at 11 o'clock on Saturday night. And but things were pretty spirited back then, and there was quite a few engagements, shall we say, between the law enforcement people and our guests.
Dick, tell us of your most memorable experience of 1973.
Well, I don't know if this isn't very glamorous or anything like that, but what happened one night is must have been around 9 o'clock at night, maybe on Friday night. All of the sewers in the whole park backed up. The sewers in the Arts and Crafts building, the sewers in the Lions building, everywhere where we had facilities, they backed up. So we started a search to see what was going on, because we surely needed another 3 or 4 hours of bathroom services. And we found out that the septic tank, which is how we handled our sewage at the time, had been completely plugged up. The thing hadn't been used for a whole year, and it was flat out plugged up. And so Bill Spear and Ted Lazinski were my partners on that project, and so we did what had to be done. We took the top off of this septic tank, and you can guess the sort of vision that we had when we opened that up, and the challenge we had to unplug that thing and get things back in order. We had probably several hundred people ringing that septic tank area, enjoying Spear and Lazinski and me down in that mess trying to clean it up. But we got it unplugged, and the party carried on with no harm done.
Dick, sum up for us your festival experience throughout the years.
Well, it certainly was a year of commitment as you preceded the event, because there was an awful lot of planning that we had to do, and which later chairmen still had to do and still are doing today, I'm sure. But I do know that it took a full year of all the spare time you could muster. But I have to, as I look back, say that I really enjoyed it, because one of the things that I've always valued about the festival work is the fact that you got to know an awful lot more people in a much better way than you would have any other way, because when you're cleaning out septic tanks with people and building fences and making decisions on ticket sales and food and all these things and the entertainment, and you really get to work with people, and I value that very much, because I know a lot of people so much better today than I would have then. It also gives the community, I think, a real shot in the arm, because this togetherness just doesn't stop when the festival is over. It stays on with the community. So I think for all the people that worked on the festival over the years, there was a lot of carryover value to the community from the cooperation that went on beyond working just on the festival. So I've always enjoyed very much the activity and the work that I did with the festival.
Well, Dick, and the festival admires your dedication. A lot of people don't know that you're down there still during the day before the festival is open, sweeping the sidewalks and doing other duties, and you're really still very dedicated, and we certainly appreciate you.
Well, thank you very much.
You're
It's
welcome.
my pleasure.
Dick, Arnold Kruger was president in 1974 following you, and he couldn't be with us for this taping, but I understand he has something he would like you to pass along.
Well, yes, I really enjoyed working with Arn. He worked with me a lot because he knew he was following me the following year, and he was really a good chairman, I felt, and did a good job. Of course, as most of us know, he's retired in Phoenix, Sun City for the winter months, and so he can't be with us today. But I know that he has told me that he always admired the dedication of the people, and felt it was a great experience for him to get to know people more, and was always impressed as to how you could get things done in Frankenmuth. So I'm sure Arn's with us in spirit here today.
Joe Kramer, thanks for being with us. Joe, how did you get involved with the Civic Events Council?
Kind of a long story. I got a job at Star of the West, and they told me that farm tours were part of my responsibility, I guess. And after doing that for a year or two, Mike Pozeski was on the board and later president, and somehow he drafted me.
And Joe, you were president what year?
1995.
1995?
Yeah.
Tell me, what's your most memorable experience of that year?
Whew. We had lots of memories, but I would say on a Sunday evening after a long day of setup, and we ordered pizza and a few beers and ended up just sorting out the whole day's activities, and my buddy Frank Frisch was there with his Harley, and I decided that I knew how to ride one of those and hadn't done it in a long time, and took it for a buzz around the park and was followed into the blue or brown building and by the local law enforcement, where I got to learn how to stand on one leg. And I think once they found out what we were doing down there and the good cause we were trying to help, everything turned out just fine.
I understand we were in need of a maypole that year. How did you obtain that maypole?
Well, we had one flagged and picked, and it was either down on I-69 or out on the Dixie Highway or someplace, but we ran out of time getting it cut down and hauled into the park. So late one night, the day before festival, we sort of picked one out in the back of the park and planted it.
Joe, 1995 marks a year for many of us historically as a year of change. You no longer had an executive director and other things changed. Tell me a little more about that.
That was a challenge. Carrie left us in November. Everybody jumped in and took a piece of the load. We were in the midst of implementing our new strategic plan. Everybody seemed pretty focused, and everybody obviously was really committed. Once we pieced it off, it wasn't that big a deal, and it worked out really well. I think everybody took a little more ownership in the festival. It turned out for the good.
And you actually are the author of the strategic plan that we still use today?
I don't know if I would say I was the author. I was sure part of a group that put in a lot of time on it. It was a big group. Everybody really bought into that, and I think it made the CEC stronger, and I hope we still use it today.
We do. Joe, what special events or activities did you have during your year?
My year, we brought back the free area and the fee area, and we used a fence to divide that up. It actually worked out pretty good, but the Chamber of Commerce jumped in and helped us with the kinder plots that year. My year was also the year of new car sales in Heritage Park. We involved the 4 local car dealerships, and they were good to us and put a lot of time into bringing a bunch of cars down there for people to look at. I think it worked out good.
Joe, how would you sum up your festival experience?
Very tough question, but it was extremely positive for me. We put in a lot of hours, and I saw how our community can work together. I never would have imagined seeing the group of people come together that I got to be part of. We saw, I would say, at the best term, sort of a mending of the fences between the Civic Events Council, the Chamber of Commerce, the downtown business. I think they all came together and were very supportive of each other's agendas and for our mutual benefit. I got to meet people that I never would have had the opportunity without the Bavarian Festival.
Joe, any advice do you have for those who would like to or are thinking about getting involved in the CEC?
I would encourage them. I think it's a great opportunity to give back to the community. I think that's why I got started with it originally, to be honest with you, and it opens a lot of doors. It shows you a lot of new faces, and again, it's a chance to give back.
Mike Podeski, thanks for joining us. Mike, tell me, how did you get involved with the Civic Events Council?
I got involved when I was still quite young. I acted as concessions chairman for 3 or 4 years. At that point, Jerry Stanton was looking for a second vice president for his year, and he asked me to be the second VP, and I accepted the job, and it kind of went from there.
And what year were you president?
I was president in 1989.
Tell me, what's the most memorable experience of that year?
It was one of those wet years. We had, of 8 days of festival, we had 7 days of rain. The only day it did not rain was Parade Sunday, which we're thankful for that anyway.
I understand you took a balloon ride during your year.
Yeah, actually it was a year prior to my year as chairman or president, but it was truly a thrill, and I would encourage anyone who gets a chance to take a balloon ride.
What problems or challenges did you face during your year as president?
Well, the rain, of course, caused us a lot of grief, but I was president the year after Glenn Campbell was brought in, and Glenn Campbell did not go off like we had expected he would. Although I think it was still the right thing to do, it just needed time to grow. That program needed time to grow. So we decided not to have big name entertainment my year, so we had to revamp the entire program again, and that caused us some difficulties.
What special events or activities did you have in 1989?
Well, you refreshed my memory, but we did have a strawberry stomp that year. I think we had the Festival Olympics to kick off Frankenmuth Night, along with a lot of the other things that everybody has gotten used to and accustomed to here in the last few years.
Mike, how would you sum up your festival experience?
Well, challenging. As I mentioned, I was not 30 years old yet when I was president, and being as young as I was caused some difficulties and some challenges. But other than that and the rain, we pulled it off just like we do every year, and certainly it's not a one-man show by any means. You have to have a lot of good people to be able to pull a festival off like that, and we did.
Well, Mike, thank you. Tom Zulig, thanks for joining us. Tom, tell me, how did you get involved with the Civic Events Council?
Well, I got involved back in 1977 when I was in the JCs and had worked with the JCs with Gary Ruprecht on the barbecue several years, and they had an opening on the council, and I felt it was time for me to run and become part of the festival. So that's kind of what got me started and got me brought in.
And then 13 years later, in 1990, you became president. What's your most memorable experience of that year?
I guess two things would come to mind for the festival year. At that time, our children were quite young. Alex, our youngest, was 2, and Alyssa, the oldest, was, she was 10 at the time, and Melanie was 6. And seeing them and how they enjoyed the festival was terrific. It was a great year, and they certainly had a great time with the festival. One of the difficult times was the Sunday before the festival began. We had a terrific windstorm that went through. It took one of the tents down, and the big telephone poles and the big tent were pulled out of the ground, swinging through the air, and when it all ceased, we had to rebuild everything down at the park. So there was a lot of work to do within 1 week. But the volunteers all got it done. They came through, and we had a good year.
What kind of special activities or events did you have in your year?
Oh, that year we expanded a little bit on the Kinderplatz. We also had a new petting zoo, which was a little bigger, even had some animals different than we'd had before. There was a turtle that year and some other animals that children normally wouldn't see around here.
And you had big name entertainment?
Yes, we did. Glenn Campbell was there that year.
Tom, how would you sum up your festival experience?
My festival experience was a good experience. I got to know and work with people that I hadn't worked with before. Seeing the volunteers come through as they did at a time which was really difficult was a big plus. It was incredible to see how they could put it all back together after it was gone. One other thing that was good from that year was I had an opening on my board, which I talked to a friend of mine, and made an appointment and told him if he wants to be on the board, he may well get asked to run. He did run after that, and he was the festival president 2 years ago, John Compton. So you can see that early involvement in, as the festival changes and grows, those volunteers do go on and become involved and become festival leaders later on.
Tom, how did being involved with the Civic Events Council actually get you more involved into the community?
I guess the biggest item there, Sue, would be as the vice chairman of Parks and Rec, I was appointed to, as the vice chairman of the Civic Events Council, I was appointed to the Parks and Rec Commission, where I served for a couple of years and then decided to continue being on Parks and Recreation Committee, and today I'm the chairman of the Parks and Recreation Commission. So that's really led to my involvement in working in the Parks and Rec system within the community.
Any advice you might have to those who are thinking of joining the Civic Events Council?
I would say anyone that wants to meet people and become involved should definitely do that. They'll find it a wonderful experience, and they'll get to know a lot of people and be able to jump in with both feet and work to help the community as a whole.
Well, Tom Zulig, thank you very much for your years of service to the festival and your continued work in the community.
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us. Tell me, Sally, how did you get involved with the Civic Events Council?
I started back in '71 in the ticket office and worked every year since then, and then just kind of worked my way up.
And you were president what year?
1993.
What's your most memorable experience of that year?
Perfect weather. I just couldn't have asked for a more perfect week than we had that year. We had rain on the last Saturday, but we didn't care. It was the night of our party, and we didn't care what the weather was like, but during the week it was beautiful.
Any problems that you remember during your week?
Well, we had a turtle that was in the petting zoo that I think they told me weighed over 200 pounds. I can't remember that far back, but over 200 pounds. And we had trouble keeping electricity back there. And the guy kept saying to me, if this turtle dies, somebody's going to pay for it. And that turtle cost like $4,000.
Oh, no.
So that was one thing. Every morning I checked to make sure the turtle was still breathing.
Did you have big name entertainment your year?
Yes, we had Jim Neighbors that year, and that was the last year of the big name entertainment. Dennis Kraft's year, they had the tornado, and so then we had to cover for him because they had 1,800 people that we had to give tickets to in my year, and we were a little fearful going into that because that was some good money for us, but in the long run we still made I don't remember really what it was, but I think it was like $53,000, even though we had to give Dennis Kraft's people some free tickets. So.
That's great. How would you sum up your festival experience?
Great. My experience, I think just working with all the volunteers, and this town just pulls together no matter what. And I got out of it probably the last 3 years, and I'm thinking of getting back into it again, just because of all the great people. And that's what makes this festival run, are the volunteers. It's not one person, it's not the president, it's the whole group.
Keith, thanks for being with us. Ted, tell me, how did you get involved in Civic Events Council?
Sue, way back when, my wife and I got involved in the very first Princess Ball. And I can't remember what year it was, but from then on, we were involved in the Bavarian Festival until about 1979.
What year were you president?
1977, the year after the 76, or 200th anniversary, bicentennial.
Okay. What special events did you have in 1977 that you recall?
Well, back then we had the drum and bugle competition down at the high school. We had a soccer match down at Heritage Park. We tried that to see if we could bring some people down. And I know there were others, but I can't remember just what they were.
I understand you set a lot of records in 1977. How many people do you recall attended your festival?
According to the Saginaw News, we had between 225 and 250,000 people in town that week.
Wow. Were they lined up to get in?
Yes, they were lined up particularly for the big tent. In fact, we had to shut the big tent down at 10 o'clock each night because so many people. And as we'd let 10 or 15 people out, we'd let 10 or 15 people in. And our big problem then was people were trying to get in under the fence, and through the fence, and over the fence. It was a major problem back then, crowd control.
Another record you set were for chicken dinners.
Yes, we sold 9,105 chicken dinners that week. We sold, how many half barrels was that, did I tell you, of beer? Just on that one day. In fact, on opening Sunday, we sold 95 half barrels of beer just on Sunday alone.
Sounds like you did a lot of hard work your year.
We did a lot of hard work that year, and the restrooms were filled to the capacity. In fact, they would overflow.
Literally.
Literally overflow.
You did a lot of construction your year.
Yes, we did. A lot of the things that are done at the park now, we did the first 2 years prior to my reign as president. But in 1977, we did build the pavilion down by the big barbecue pit. We put in all the major telephone poles that the tent is attached to now that year. We bought a new cooler for down there, so they gave us 2 coolers, one in the barbecue area and one in the main tent, the big tent. We built 4 permanent stages down there for the bands to play on.
You had quite a bit of rain your year.
Yes, we did. In fact, on Friday night, which was our biggest night, it rained, started raining about 10 o'clock, and Don Molmeister and I were up till 3:30 the next morning pulling cars out of our new parking lot. In fact, we even found one car in the river.
Well, speaking of in the river, I understand the motorcycle gangs were heavy into putting other things in the river during 77.
Yes, they were. We were blessed with Brutus and his gang from Detroit, about 150, 200 motorcyclists dressed out in their finest attire and their vulgarity. And each year their new member had to try to jump the river, and it was quite an event. They'd circle around the park for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and then all of a sudden they'd go up the ramp and they'd make it about 10 feet.
And there was a wedding in the motorcycle gang, I hear.
Yes, one of our CEC board members got married that night to one of the princesses of the motorcycle gang, and we gave them a pocket comb for a wedding gift.
They didn't really get married, did they?
No, they didn't really get married.
Ted, how would you sum up your festival experience?
Well, Sue, it was a great experience. We were involved with over 3,000 people in the community, and they all pulled together towards the one common goal, and it was probably the busiest year of my life, and probably one of the most memorable years of my life.
Thank you so much for your years of service.
You're most welcome.
What other special events did you have?
One of the special events we had, Sue, was we'd have square dancing down there, and they would drink about 25 urns of coffee and maybe 2 pitchers of beer.
And thanks for joining us today. Tom, tell me, how did you get involved with the Civic Events Council?
I became involved with the Civic Events Council, first of all, when I was president of the JCs. Then I served as concessions chairman for the CEC for 3 years before becoming chairman in 1968. Go ahead.
What special memories do you have of being president in 1968?
First memory being that I served as president for 6 months. I did not have the privilege of serving as first vice president or second vice president. The other memories would probably be that it was the first day, or the first year that we had an 8-day festival, because it was the year that Robert Kennedy was assassinated, and we postponed the parade from the first Sunday and added the second Sunday.
Where was your festival located?
The festival was located in the Bavarian Inn parking lot on the south end of Bavarian Inn.
And that was
That was the second year that it was in that location. The first year was under Bob Protzman, who served as chairman in '67. It was also the second year that we created a fence-in festival area. And all the concessions and barbecues were inside the fence. And in my year, it took about 2 days, and we changed that, and all the concessions and barbecues became accessible to the outside.
How was the weather your year?
That year we had good weather until Wednesday, when a big high winds blew in, and it tore down the new festival towers that were constructed that year. And we had a sad occasion in that Barry Hereford was injured when they fell on him. And it was, after that, the weather was rather calm again, but that Wednesday was a bad day.
What other special events did you have during your festival?
Things that took place during my festival as far as special events, of course, were the JCs had their bike races. We had the JC sponsor some helicopter rides. There were puppet shows, and there were farm tours and city tours. And of course we had the barbecues. We also had the 2 dance tents. 1968 was also the year that the infamous Huber Folly, the trailer unit, was purchased, which contained the restrooms, and they were used until 1994 or so in the Heritage Park. But that was the year that they were purchased, in 1968.
Tom, how would you sum up your festival experience?
I would say the festival experience was a great experience, but I don't relish the thought of serving it only president as 6 months and not having the opportunity to serve as vice president. But it was a wonderful experience. My family was young, and it was hard on them, but we had a good time.
Thanks for joining us. Greg, how did you get involved with the Civic Events Council?
Well, Sue, it goes back to about 1990 when Tom Zillig roped me into going out to a party at the Dead Creek. And out at this party, I ran into a guy named Julio. And I think after about 25 beers and 30 cow nuts, or bull nuts, I finally agreed to work with Julio on the grounds committee for the CEC. So it goes back to, to about 1990.
What year were you president?
1997.
Tell me some of your most memorable experiences of your year.
As far as memorable, I would say the meetings were definitely most memorable. It seemed about every night of the week we were meeting with a different committee to make things happen. I would say the shoe plugging was a real fun part. That was kind of a challenge in itself, with not only being president of the festival, but also being involved with the entertainment as an entertainer, with the Franklin Shoe Pluggers and working with the Rhinelanders and Marv Herzog and so forth. So that was a lot of fun. Big challenge was, I would say, working with all the different volunteers and different subcommittees and so forth, and making sure everybody was doing what they should be doing, keeping everybody on track for our goal, which worked out real well. I would say one of the problems we had was working with McDonough and trying to keep the whole amusement vendor issue running smoothly throughout the course of the festival. And that kind of posed a new challenge every day. I think, looking back on past festivals, I think one of our challenges in '97, and will continue to be a challenge, and that's with any festival, and that's making sure that we have adequate numbers to keep festivals going. That seems to be a bigger and bigger challenge in itself.
What special events did you have?
Well, 1997 featured 2 new things down at the festival. Actually, one of them was new, and that was our German agricultural display, and that was sponsored by the German Embassy, and that featured the contributions of German immigrants to American agriculture, and that was featured in the tan building or the blue building or the brown building or the CC building, whichever you choose. So that was kind of nice. We also had heritage arts displays, which were brought back from probably 10 years ago or so, and that featured artisans and craftsmen from yesteryear that kind of displayed their crafts and the way of doing things many years ago. So that was kind of an exciting addition to the festival for '97 as well. And we had great weather.
How would you sum up your festival experience?
I would say it was very rewarding. It's an experience that I would recommend everybody try that has any interest in community service. A lot of sweat, a lot of good times, a lot of beer. That's all part of it too in Frankenmuth. So yeah, it was just a lot of fun, a lot of work, but definitely worthwhile. I would say the really important people, of course everybody, all volunteers are important, Sue, but really the people, the core committee, or the exec committee that really made things happen for '97 would be Jerry and Sue Hadaway, Craig Fick, Don Hahn, who does just a tremendous job as treasurer, and Kathy Kramer. And then we also had Mark Pankner was our sponsorship chairman. He did a whale of a job too, soliciting sponsorship funds. So, and that was very successful for '97.
Well, really, I belong to the Rotary, and that was such a great group. And everybody seemed to work together at the Rotary, and it blended over into the Civic Events Council, and I just felt it was my civic duty to get involved in there, and they were a nice bunch of people, and we had a lot of fun. We enjoyed working, and one thing led to another, and the first thing in '69 I was asked to be vice chairman. Mm-hmm. And then of course that got to be pretty serious, because it was about that time when they decided to move from uptown or downtown to the area where we're now, and it was a real hazard up there. First of all, we were using all the Bavarian's parking lot, and there was no place to park, and people would come into town and they'd park on the side streets, block the driveways of a lot of citizens, and we had a lot of complaints. But the main problem we thought was in case of emergency, if we would have a tornado or a big fire, and there's just Main Street, there's no other way of getting in and out of town, we could have really had a real serious problem. So it was, so the majority ruled, and we decided to go down there. And I worked under Eric Westberg. He was the '69 chairman, and he needed a lot of help, and it was kind of a big step to move from downtown to the park. But I had Al Nicholas, who was a terrific man. He did a lot for the city, and he really helped me a lot. He had a little power, and he got things done. It was nice when he worked with Al. We decided to do something. I said, Al, you think we ought to do that? And he'd say, I think it's the right thing, we're going to do it. And there was no backing out, and we just went ahead with it.
Okay. Now, Oscar, was the major factor in the decision to go down to Heritage Park, was that because of the potential for catastrophe, or was it mostly because of the space or the room?
Well, the room it was terrible. It was just too crowded. But the feeling of the city and the city fathers was that we were taking a terrific chance, keeping it up there. Of course, we did have a few people that, after we got started going down there, that didn't want to go down and thought we should turn back. But
Yeah, well, that's been an ongoing debate.
Yeah.
It really has, even as of 1998. So.
Is that right?
Yeah. What were some of your most memorable experiences?
Well, getting the park ready was quite a deal because it was the grounds. But we were fortunate. Al and Nicholas approached the school, and we got the high school kids to come down one afternoon after 3 o'clock to pick up the stones and the wood and stuff. And one thing led to another. It seemed at that time, everybody you asked, they would help. We got very few refusals. And not only when you ask people, they would get some other people to help them. And it was really a good city function. And then, of course, the big decision was we had to get all the clubs, all the organizations, the Rotary, the Lions Club, and all the clubs and organizations to move down there and build some stands or something and they did a great job. And you look at it today, just look at the Rotary building, and the Lions have a beautiful restaurant and all that. And then, of course, we were worried about our beer situation, so Tiny and I and some other friends, we went to the Swiss Festival in New Glarus, Wisconsin. And they have 3-4 different festivals there every year. And we noticed that the Huber Brewing Company had a refrigerated truck with the beer spigots on the outside, and they were drawing the beer from the outside. And we really liked that idea. So we got back town and we approached Red Seilinger, who was the distributor for Carling's, and we wanted to get him to put a trailer in there, but he didn't care too much, but we finally twisted his arm and we got him to do it.
Oh, great.
And that was one of the better things, really, because I know we sold a lot less half barrels and made several $1,000s more on the beer that year, the first year alone, because there was no shrinkage, no waste. Because before they used to have these metal cattle tanks where they tapped the beer, and once they got about half empty or 2/3, they would bob around. A lot of it was wasted, and so that was a good step. And the whole council was really good to work with. Everybody cooperated. But then we had a lot of buildings to put up, and there was a lot of activity down there that year.
Now, Oscar, you were saying something about the restrooms down at the park and the challenges that you had with that project.
Yeah, that was quite a deal. Nobody seemed to. We had volunteers for putting everything, but when it came to moving the restrooms, we didn't have any volunteers. But we did get it down, and such as they were at that time, nothing like we have today. But we had very good people for our sanitary department. We had the Boy Scouts come in very early in the morning with their parents, and they picked up all the papers and everything. And I don't know, I think it cost us $500 for the whole week.
Oh, that's great.
And it was that saved one thing. We had the grounds quite neat.
Yeah, well, the Scouts have been doing that recently as well. The last couple of years, I don't think we get by for $500 so anyway.
I doubt it.
So, what were some of the special things that happened down there? Whether it be activities relative to performers or special events happening down there, or some of the crazier things that happened while you were president in 1970?
Well, the entertainment was terrific. In them years, we had Marv Herzog and his band, and I think Eddie Schieffer, and some of the local bands, plus we had some good bands out of Detroit. I think about 3, the Rhinelanders I can remember, and some of those. And then the Bavarian and Senders, they would have real good entertainment. They had entertainment from Chicago and Milwaukee and New Glarus, some from Canada, and even some from Germany usually.
Great.
But one of the things that one of the things I'll never forget is about a week before the festival, Chief Sink got a phone call from Milwaukee and a phone call from Chicago, from the Devil's Disciples and Hell's Angels. and they claimed they were going to bring in 200 strong from each. But it turned out they only brought about 50 or 60, which was plenty. And the chief came over to me and he said, "What do you think we ought to do with them?" And I said, "I have no idea. Can we keep them out?" And he said, "No, that's illegal. We cannot do that." But he said, "I think I have a solution." I said, "What is it?" Well, he said, I'd like to, about a half a mile south from the grounds, put up a cable. And when they just about get there, raise that cable just above their shoulders. And that would take care of them. And then we can notify their mothers and tell them where they are. But Hank was very disturbed about it. But they came and they really kept the whole council nervous for at least Sunday. They were walking around with a bottle of cheap wine, which was against the law. But we just let them walk. And we had a wonderful group in the mounted patrol. And they were really congenial to them. They really talked to them. And they were looking for arguments, and nobody would give them an argument. And they were a little disappointed in that. But they just floated around in and out. I think a couple of them were taken down to the county jail. But they got in a little trouble. And Freddie Meyer was there at that time. He was one of the policemen, and I think he maced a couple and took them to the county jail.
Right. Oscar, how successful was their bike jump across the Cass River that year?
I think it was that year. They were partying pretty heavy, and one of them claimed he could take his bike and jump the Cass River. And they talked about that for 2-3 hours. And finally they stripped the bike down, and this guy took off across. He seemed to have a pretty good start, but he only went in there about 25-30 feet, and he was submerged. But his buddies went in and got him out, and the bike was all bent up. So they had gotten a bunch of firewood from Lou Weber's farm. I don't think they paid for it, but they got it, and they had a good fire going. So they put this bike on top, and they kind of sacrificed the bike. Well, all right, I don't want to take credit for this stuff. It really was the council that did the work. I was just fortunate to be the chairman that time, and I was so fortunate to have Al Nicholas in back of me. But the council was excellent, and we really worked together nice, and it was a great year, and we enjoyed working. It was a great civic experience, and I'd do it again if I was about 30 years younger.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, thanks a lot.
Elva, you had worked during some years with Don Malmeister, who's no longer with us. What could you say about Don?
He was the best. He loved the festival. No matter what you asked Don to do or help you with, he was always there, ready and willing.
Just a couple of things that I can remember that, and I know it, because I followed him, was that I had mentioned in my interview that we were going to change the festival from a beer drinking to a family. And that actually began in Don Malmeister's year. And when we got to petition drive, Don had the issues already addressed that were in the petition drive. It's just a case that they had to be implemented and so on from that point on. So he was actually a step ahead of what the community needs were at that particular point and so on. Many of the people know the structure in what they call the back bar area, where there was a cooler over in the JC Pavilion area, and that was built Don's year to house the summer garden area. Before that trailer was in there, Don's years, that everything was done with cans over there. So once that trailer got in place and so on, they could serve it by the keg and so on. And also, another thing that was done the Saturday afternoon before the festival started on Sunday, because in those days it started on Sunday, was the big cooler over in the big beer tent area was actually turned 90 degrees in an area that it couldn't be moved, and was done done basically by log rollers and so on, Don's year. And our engineer of that whole project was Al Nicholas, who had an engineering background, and it came off real well and so on. I think you were taking a picture, Sue, of the State Fair parade down in Detroit, and Don and the princesses and so on went down there, and it was a real unique experience because here little old Frankenmuth was down in really Metro Detroit, and the expressions of the people that don't see Frankenmuth and so on, it was probably one of the biggest I think joys that we had during the festival and so on was that. So, but it was good following Don because the whole atmosphere of the festival began to change, and I would have to say from looking from the outside that had to be Don's biggest accomplishment, and I think is what he was most proud of is moving that from the beer drinking to a truly family atmosphere down there.
And speaking of parades, what happened to Don's parade?
Don's was the year, in the only year that it was canceled. We were so wet that our lederhosen would actually stand on end. They were so hard when we got done, but we actually had a severe storm, and literally we went, Don, myself, Larry Doobie was parade chairman that year. We went down the road and actually dispersed. We actually got everybody off the street and just got them dispersed, and nobody was injured, but it's always kind of an anxious moment there.
So it had already started, and then you stopped?
Yeah, the parade had actually started, and I would say it was probably about a third that had left at the start point. And you know, on parade day, there's no place to go, but the people of Frankenmuth really took everybody in. I mean, people that need shelter, they just, you know, went in the drugstores or they went into people's houses, and everything came out great.
I remember Don was probably one of the hardest working guys that we had down there. Don was involved in everything, and he was just a super guy to work with and to work for, and he was very well organized. He took the festival to heart, and he did a super job down there.
I remember a few things about Dad being president in 1979. Here's a picture of when it rained on his parade. As you've heard, his being the only parade that was actually canceled after it started. Dad used to talk a lot about the motorcycle gangs and greasing the poles and the fun that they had. Also, remember that Polish family that rented the house behind the Eagle's Nest in Heritage Park, and how they used to help out during the festival. I remember vividly the Banjo Club. After the parade every year, the Flint Banjo Club would bring their float to our house on Cherry Street and pull it into the backyard, and they would just play for hours. It was always so much fun. I'm real proud to be following in Dad's footsteps. He was president in 1979, and I will be president in 1999, 20 years later, and I sure hope to use some things that he did in his reign as a model and as an example of my own.
How did you get involved with the CEC?
That goes way back to when shortly after I came to the community in 1966, I was involved with the Frankenmuth JCs, and I was a JC representative to the Civic Events Council. Went to most of their meetings, and the next year was elected as parliamentarian, if I remember correctly, on the board of the CEC. That was through the encouragement of Jack Otter. Jack and I came along somewhat close together. He was president of the Frankenmuth JCs, and after that I was president of the JCs, and that's how I initially got involved with the CEC. On that board were Vic and Bonnie Engel, Jack Otter, etc., and it was quite a tight-knit group. Ruth Abraham had a lot of fun back in those days, being a small organization.
Great, yeah, we know. Jack's certainly going to be missed. He sure made a big contribution to
He was a good friend for 30 years.
Yeah.
We do miss him.
Absolutely.
Anything Jack Otter did, he did with great enthusiasm, and it was always a wonderful result. But beyond that, those years, 1967, 68, 69, I think it was in 1971, that was when, at that point, the merchants were saying
hey, we've got the festival in town, but it's using up a lot of our parking. We really need the parking. And we were thinking in advance, how can we move the festival out of the community? And that's when Alan Marie Nicholas donated Heritage Park. I believe they bought that property from the Geyer brothers, some of the Geyers anyway, and donated it to the city of Frankenmuth. And when they did that, then there were some of us on the Civic Events Council board, I was one of them, who was appointed to the newly formed Heritage Park Commission. I know Al Nicholas and I were both on that commission. And shortly thereafter, we had to find a name for the park. So Al said, Jerry, you're going to be the chair of that committee, and let's do a community survey and come up with a name for that park down there. So we did the survey, and Heritage Park was the majority recommendation. That's how the park itself got its name.
What year was that that was named? Was that 71?
I think that was in 71 or early 72. Okay. I think the most memorable event I can think of is in 1986 when we had the flood. And those waters just poured through Heritage Park and into the CEC building where we were storing all our tables and chairs. And it had to be like April or May when that occurred. And we had to get all those tables and chairs steam cleaned for the, we had to do them ourselves, wash them down with a disinfectant. And that was quite an effort. That's when you see community organizations coming together. There was just an outpouring of support from the CEC members. We'd go down sometimes during the day if we sneak away from work, most evenings, and start washing and disinfecting those tables and chairs. That was the most memorable event, even though it wasn't actually my year. It was 1986, the year before I was CEC president. That was also the year that Tom Jafke had some medical problems, so he was gone a lot, so I tried to fill in for him as much as I could in 1986. And then in 1987, it was like, it felt as though I was just doing it over again.
Yeah.
And it was a good year. We made money. I think we had a day or two of rain. We made money during that festival. Nothing phenomenal, but it was a positive result.
That's
and everybody felt real good.
Yeah,
It was a great experience, and it's a great memory for me personally. I was glad I was able to do it for the community.
Super. Great. All right. Thanks a lot.
Hi, I'm Marv Herzog from Frankenmuth, Michigan. In 1959, Tiny and Dorothy Zender remodeled their restaurant, giving it a Bavarian look. They decided to hold a grand celebration. Since my band had already been playing German music for local parties for over 14 years, Tiny asked me, the band, to play for their Bavarian party. Because it was such a success, it became a yearly celebration after that. Now, 40 years later, the celebration has gone from the dining rooms of the Bavarian Inn and Zenders to the parking lot and then to Heritage Park. It became known as the Bavarian Festival and attracted people from all over the state and the nation. My band performed every year, dividing the time between the Bavarian Inn, Zenders, and Heritage Park.
Marv, how did the Bavarian Festival help spark your career?
People seeing and hearing us would want us to play for their festivals in their hometowns and states, and we began to travel outside of Frankenmuth.
Now, Marv, Tiny Zender and family were instrumental in the success of the festival right from its beginning. How has the Zender family assisted in your career?
Tiny Zender believed in me so much that he co-signed a banknote for my first 3 albums, and I've always been grateful to him for this support. We now have 30 albums, and every time we record, I think back on the first one, which we called the Bavarian Festival album.
At what point did the festival take off as a real draw for the people in the state?
In the beginning, it was the only festival in mid-Michigan, and we called it the granddaddy of them all, and its uniqueness was a real draw for people. So right off the bat, it took off.
How does the Bavarian Festival compare to the other festivals you've performed at?
Around the country, most festivals where we perform have their own themes. Whether it's a church festival or just a summer festival with all kinds of music, each has their own style. Here in Frankenmuth, the Bavarian theme has always been a good one. The only other Bavarian festival we played at was in Barnesville, Pennsylvania. and they always featured authentic Bavarian German bands, and they would have up to 65,000 people there.
Marv, does any year stand out in your mind as most memorable?
All 40 years of the Bavarian Festival have their own highlights. Probably some of the most memorable for me would be the years when we were the backup band for the German teenage singing wonder, Miss Peggy March, or Frankie Yankovic, or Myron Florin.
Marv, because you've been the major performer at the festival, what advice do you have from a musical perspective to keep the festival going for 40 more years?
To keep the Bavarian Festival strong, it's important to stay uniquely Bavarian. Authentic German food, German music, and friendly Gemütlichkeit are the main ingredients for a successful Bavarian Festival.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Congratulations to Tiny Zender and his family, the businesses of Frankenmuth, the Civics Events Council, its board members, and the thousands of volunteers who have made these last 40 years such rewarding ones for Frankenmuth.
In conclusion, Marv, how would you sum up your festival experiences?
It's been a good run, and I'm ready for many more. Keep the Bavarian Festival unique, and the people will come.
Any problems or created any trouble, and in fact, I think before when we had our last festival and the Bavarian Inn parking lot, they were actually helped us with some crowd control and some rowdies down.
I've heard stories about that, which I was surprised. I always thought, you know, most of the connotations were negative with the groups. But well, in closing, Jerry, how would you sum up your festival experience?
Oh, that's a toughie. By the time 1987 was over, quite frankly, I was burned out. But my experience as a whole, I think it was the experience of 1986 and 87 combined, because you saw the coming together of all these people from all these service organizations who comprise the Civic Events Council, and we had a goal, a common goal. We had to work together to repair the ravages of that flood. And that's what sticks in my mind most. And because year after year we come together to put on the festival. And working together as a volunteer organization on behalf of the community is satisfying.